Have you ever experienced inappropriate physical excitement right in the middle of the most intense worship? Precisely when your spirit is connecting with God. And have you felt like the worst of sinners, without understanding why your body reacts that way in the most sacred moment? What if I told you that this embarrassing phenomenon, which shames millions of Christian men, is not a sign that you are depraved or impure, but rather evidence of a strategic spiritual attack by the enemy? An attack designed specifically to pull you out of the presence of God through paralyzing shame. What if you discovered that there is a clear spiritual and physiological explanation for why this happens, and that there is a specific biblical strategy to overcome this attack that you have probably never been taught? Are you prepared to understand what is really happening when your body responds physically in moments of greatest spiritual intimacy with God? Today, I am going to reveal a truth that will free millions of men from the secret shame they have carried for years. I am not going to give you condemnatory religiosity that will only multiply your guilt. I am going to show you exactly why this phenomenon happens, what is happening in the spiritual realm when it occurs, and how to defeat it permanently. This is not a teaching on common lust. This is a revelation about a specific demonic attack that occurs precisely in moments of deep worship to steal your experience of intimacy with God. Do not skip this video under any circumstances, because what you are about to discover will free you from years of unnecessary shame and will teach you to discern between a spiritual attack and genuine temptation. And I want to remind you of something fundamental. It was not you who found this channel, Hebrew Sins. It was this channel that found you. Precisely at this moment when you desperately need to understand that you are not alone in this battle and that there is a biblical explanation and solution. Every video that comes into your life has a specific divine purpose. And before we dive into the deep study we will conduct today, I am going to tell you an ancient story that happened in the times of the Hebrew people in Canaan. A story about a young man who lived tormented by this very phenomenon, until a wise man revealed the spiritual truth behind what he was experiencing. I won't reveal the details yet, but I promise that when you hear this complete story, you will understand that millions of pious men have experienced exactly the same thing as you, and that the shame you have felt is precisely the enemy's objective to drive you away from the presence of God. You will discover that there is a specific spiritual battle being waged in your body during moments of intense worship. What happened to the protagonist of the story will reveal truths that will completely change how you understand and respond to this attack. This story contains the secret of why the enemy specifically attacks your body in moments of spiritual elevation. Now, comment this powerful phrase, "I will no longer be ashamed of spiritual attacks." This is your declaration that you understand this is not your depraved nature, but spiritual warfare. If you are not subscribed, do it right now because 2 Corinthians 10, verse 3 says that though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. This channel exists to teach you to discern between carnal battles and spiritual battles. The enemy is fighting desperately for you to close this video because he knows that if you understand his strategy, his weapon of shame will become ineffective. I will begin with the story. In the hills near Shechem lived a young man named Eliab. He was 24 years old, and since he was 18, he had experienced something that filled him with deep shame and devastating confusion. Every time he went to the synagogue and the worship intensified, when he felt the presence of the Most High in a powerful way, when his spirit soared in genuine connection with God, his body would respond with inappropriate physical excitement, erections during worship, sexual arousal at the most sacred moment. And for Eliab, this was absolute torment. He condemned himself fiercely. He thought he was the most depraved man who existed. He wondered how it was possible that his mind was completely focused on God, without any lustful thoughts, and yet his body would respond that way. He tried everything. He fasted before going to the synagogue. He prayed intensely, asking for deliverance. He avoided looking at any woman, but nothing worked. The pattern continued relentlessly. Every time the worship deepened, his body reacted. And the shame was so intense that he frequently had to leave the synagogue early, pretending to be physically unwell. Eliab began to believe that perhaps God rejected him, that perhaps he was so impure that even in moments of worship, his sinful nature manifested. He considered stopping attending the synagogue completely to avoid the shame. The battle was so intense that he thought about giving up entirely on his pursuit of God, convinced he was too dirty to approach the Most High. One day, an elderly teacher named Nadab arrived in the village. This man had a reputation for understanding spiritual battles that others did not comprehend. Eliab, desperate, decided to risk it and confess his struggle to him in private, expecting condemnation but also hoping for answers. With tears of shame, he told him everything. How during the most intense worship, when his mind was completely on God without any impure thoughts, his body would respond with sexual excitement that filled him with devastating guilt. Nadab listened to him patiently. And when Eliab finished, he did something completely unexpected. He smiled with compassion and said, "Son, what you are experiencing is not your depravity. It is a specific spiritual attack. And you are not the only one. Thousands of pious men have experienced exactly the same thing throughout generations." Eliab was stunned. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't evidence that he was impure. Nadab began to explain, "Listen to me carefully. When your spirit rises in genuine worship and you begin to connect deeply with the Most High, the enemy panics. He knows that in those moments of spiritual intimacy, God is transforming you, revealing truths to you, strengthening your faith. So, the enemy uses one of his most effective weapons, an attack on the physical body to create shame that will pull you out of that moment of divine connection. He specifically attacks your sexual area because he knows that generates maximum shame, that it will make you feel unworthy of being in God's presence. Nadab continued, "Your mind is on God. You have no lustful thoughts, but your body responds physically. That is not a coincidence. It is a demonic strategy. The enemy can directly stimulate your nervous system to provoke a physical response without your mind being involved. It is an external attack, not an internal desire. And it works perfectly because it fills you with shame, makes you feel dirty, forces you to leave the place of worship, and destroys your connection with God in that moment. You have been doing exactly what the enemy wanted, condemning yourself and moving away from God precisely when you were closest to him." Eliab could not believe what he was hearing. Was it possible that all his shame had been misinterpreted? Nadab gave him specific instructions. "The next time this happens during worship, do not condemn yourself. Recognize it as the spiritual attack it is. Declare mentally, 'I recognize this attack from the enemy. My body may be reacting, but my spirit remains focused on God. I reject the shame. I will continue to worship. Do not leave the place. Do not allow the attack to achieve its objective of taking you out of the divine presence. Stay there. Keep worshiping with your spirit, and you will see that the attack loses its power when it no longer manages to shame you." Eliab decided to try it. The next time he went to the synagogue and the worship intensified, it happened again. His body responded with physical excitement. But this time, instead of condemning himself and running out, he declared mentally, "This is an attack from the enemy. I reject the shame. My spirit continues to worship." And something amazing happened. The excitement diminished quickly, not immediately, but within minutes. And for the first time in years, Eliab was able to remain in deep worship without being expelled by shame. Over time, the attacks became less frequent and less intense, until they finally ceased almost completely. Eliab had learned to discern the attack and not give it power through shame. Now, listen to me with absolute attention, because I am going to reveal truths that will completely transform your understanding of what is happening when you experience this embarrassing phenomenon during moments of worship or spiritual intimacy. First, you need to understand that there are 3 possible sources of sexual excitement. 1. Genuine lustful thoughts from your mind. 2. Natural physiological responses of your body. 3. Direct spiritual attacks from the enemy. Most Christians only recognize the first 2, completely ignoring the third. But the third is real, it is biblical, and it is devastatingly effective. Let me explain exactly what is happening, physiologically and spiritually, when this occurs during worship. Physiologically, when you enter deep worship, your body releases endorphins, oxytocin, and other chemicals associated with pleasure, connection, and ecstasy. These are the same chemicals that are released during sexual intimacy. Your brain does not always perfectly distinguish between spiritual ecstasy and physical ecstasy, especially when you are young and your hormonal system is highly sensitive. This is why some men experience a physical response during moments of intense emotional or spiritual elevation, even without any mental sexual stimulus. Spiritually, there is something darker happening. The enemy knows your physiology perfectly because he observes it constantly. When he sees that you are entering into deep intimacy with God during worship, when he sees your spirit is ascending and God is about to reveal something to you or transform you, the enemy intervenes. He can directly stimulate your nervous system, specifically the autonomous nervous system which controls involuntary functions like sexual arousal. He can create a physical response without your mind being involved, precisely to generate massive shame that pulls you out of the moment of divine connection. And here is the devastating part. His strategy works perfectly, because most Christian men immediately interpret that physical response as evidence of their internal depravity. They condemn themselves fiercely. They fill with paralyzing shame. They leave the place of worship feeling unworthy and spend days or weeks away from God because of guilt. The enemy achieved exactly what he wanted: to steal your moment of intimacy with God and create distance between you and the Father through false shame. Now, let me confront you with love but with firmness about the devastating mistakes you have probably been making. First, you have been interpreting everything as if it were your fault, without discerning that it may be an external attack. Second, you have been giving power to the attack through excessive shame, instead of rejecting it as the demonic strategy it is. Third, you have been allowing the attack to achieve its objective of taking you out of God's presence. Fourth, you have probably kept this a total secret, allowing the shame to multiply in isolation. Fifth, you have been avoiding moments of deep spiritual intimacy for fear that it will happen again. Here are the signs that what you are experiencing is a spiritual attack and not genuine lust. Sign 1. It happens specifically during moments of intense worship or deep spiritual intimacy. Sign 2. Your mind is completely focused on God, without any lustful thoughts when it happens. Sign 3. It is accompanied by overwhelming shame that makes you want to flee immediately. Sign 4. It only happens in spiritual contexts, not in normal, everyday situations. Sign 5. The deeper your connection with God is in that moment, the more intense the physical response is. Sign 6. You have prayed fervently against this, but it continues to happen. If you identify with 4 or more of these signs, what you are experiencing is a specific spiritual attack, not common lust. And you need to learn to discern it and reject it correctly. And now, following what I am revealing to you, I need you to comment here below about your personal experience, prudently. If you have experienced this, comment simply, "I have experienced this attack." If you know others who have experienced it, share that. I need to know your situation because I am going to say a specific prayer of deliverance at the end. Do not give graphic details. Maintain decency, but be honest about having experienced this. And I solemnly warn you, do not pause this video. The Holy Spirit is freeing you from years of false shame right now. What is coming has the power to teach you to discern and defeat this attack definitively. Now, I am going to show you biblical examples that confirm that the enemy can and does attack the physical body directly. First, Job chapter 2. Satan asked God for permission to touch Job's body, and God allowed it within specific limits. Satan struck Job with malignant sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. This unequivocally demonstrates that the enemy can attack the physical body directly, causing bodily reactions without the person's mind being involved. Second, Luke 13, verses 11 to 16. Jesus healed a woman who had been bent over for 18 years and could not straighten up. Jesus explicitly said that Satan had bound her for those 18 years. It was demonic bondage manifested as a physical condition. This confirms the enemy can cause real physical symptoms. Third, 2 Corinthians 12, verses 7 to 9. Paul speaks of a thorn in his flesh, a messenger of Satan sent to buffet him. It was physical torment sent by the enemy. Fourth, Matthew 17, verses 14 to 18. A man brought his son who had a demon that threw him into the fire and into the water. The demon caused physical convulsions in the boy. They were physical manifestations of a spiritual attack. Fifth, Mark 9, verses 17 to 29. The same incident expanded. The boy had a mute and deaf spirit that also caused convulsions. Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, and the boy was healed. They were physical symptoms caused by a spiritual entity. These passages demonstrate without a doubt that the enemy can attack the physical body directly, causing symptoms and reactions that do not originate in the person's mind. If he can cause sores, a bent back, and convulsions, then he can certainly stimulate the nervous system to cause physical excitement without the mind being involved. It is the same category of attack, only this one is specifically designed to create maximum shame in spiritual contexts. Now, meticulously connect this with Eliab and with yourself. Eliab lived tormented for years, believing he was depraved, when in reality, he was under a specific spiritual attack during his moments of greatest elevation with God. The majority of Christian men are living exactly the same thing right now, carrying massive shame for something that is not their fault, but is a demonic strategy. And the enemy is achieving his objective perfectly, taking them out of the presence of God through shame. James 4, verse 7 commands, "Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you." Observe the order. First, submit to God. Second, resist the devil. When you are in worship and this attack comes, you are already submitted to God in that moment. Now, you need to resist the devil. How? By recognizing the attack, rejecting the shame, and staying in worship. Not fleeing in shame, but resisting firmly. Ephesians 6, verses 11 to 12. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers. The word for wiles in Greek is methodia, calculated methods. The enemy has specific methods. This attack during worship is one of his most effective methods against pious men. Now, go to your Bible and read all the passages I mentioned about the enemy's physical attacks. Study how Jesus responded to these attacks, by discerning them correctly, not blaming the person, but rebuking the spirit directly. Learn to do the same when this attack comes. And now, following naturally with this revelation, comment here below with your age. Why is this important? Because this attack is most common in young men, between 15 and 35, when hormones are most active. Your age helps me pray specifically according to your stage of vulnerability. Now, I want to talk to you about something that is happening in churches in this month of October 2025. Thousands of young men are stopping attending church or avoiding moments of intense worship specifically because of this phenomenon. The shame is so intense that they prefer to stay away completely. And the enemy is achieving exactly what he wants, taking pious men out of the presence of God through an attack they misinterpret as their own depravity. The modern church has completely failed to teach about this out of excessive modesty. Pastors never mention this topic. Men suffer in silence, believing they are the only ones, when the reality is that millions experience it. This silence from the church is costing spiritual lives. And this is where I want to genuinely congratulate you. The fact that you are here seeking understanding, instead of simply walking away from God in shame, demonstrates that your heart is genuine. The majority give up. You are fighting for answers. That distinguishes you as a real warrior. I am so honored to have walked with you through this liberating message. I wish I could look you in the eyes and tell you, you are not alone. You are not depraved. You are under attack because you are dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. If there were technical problems or repetitions, forgive me. My only desire was to free you from unnecessary shame. Go in peace, but go transformed. Go knowing that you will discern between spiritual attack and genuine lust. May it be so in your life, from this day and forever.